Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the next session of our Agentic DevOps Live series. My name's Anna. I'll be your producer for this session. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our presenters for today. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you, Anna. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. My name is Dave Burnison. I'm a Senior DevOps Advocate with GitHub. And with me is Dan Helm. Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Dan Helm. I am Product Manager for Azure Boards, Azure Repos, Azure Wiki, and our GitHub integration between Azure DevOps and GitHub.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure working with you once again, Dan. And today we want to talk about AI-powered workflows with GitHub and Azure DevOps. Now, in the past, Azure DevOps and GitHub were kind of seen as separate choices, separate DevOps stacks, but that is no longer the case. Now we look at them as being a way to integrate your, get back to my windows here. There we go. Be able to integrate Azure DevOps and GitHub, which is your path to agentic AI. Bring AI right into everybody on the development team, right into their lap. And when we look at things, we kind of look at things like your DevOps stack being kind of like a house, right? You've got different rooms or different floors. You've got repos for managing source control. Now, with that, you are able to leverage GitHub Copilot, at least those features that you can leverage from the IDEs like Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, even including Eclipse, Xcode, and the JetBrains family of IDEs. You can bring in the core of GitHub Advanced Security with GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. And no doubt, if you're working in an enterprise world, you're using Azure boards, but you've customized Azure boards. You've got custom fields on your forms, or customized the forms, or even added custom work item types, and you're leveraging those dashboards and roll-ups across teams. You're leveraging Azure pipelines for CI/CD, deploying to whether it's Azure Kubernetes services or Azure web apps, and leveraging templates to ensure that all of your compliance needs are being met. Leveraging Azure test plans used to be a lot for manual test tracking. We've got even better integration now with automated testing, being able to assign automated tests directly to test plans so that you can track things, and everything's been, an uptick on the investment in Azure test plans the last year or so. And then artifact management with Azure Artifacts. Now, what a lot of people perceived is that GitHub was like a whole nother house. Yes, it has repos for managing source code, very similar to Azure Repos. But now there's a lot more features for GitHub Copilot built right into the GitHub platform itself, whether it's the Copilot coding agent or the agents tab right on the GitHub Enterprise Cloud user interface. The full suite of GitHub Advanced Security tools, including things like Copilot Autofix, being able to have Copilot suggest and fix vulnerabilities that the code scanning has found. There's also issues in projects. Issues in projects for a lot of enterprises are not quite as rich as Azure boards with the configurable dashboards and all the customization capabilities and such. GitHub Actions for CI/CD, very similar to Azure pipelines, but still some differences, especially if you're leveraging templates. GitHub has reusable workflows and things, but if you've invested in templates in Azure pipelines, you might want to continue to use those for now and look towards GitHub Actions maybe for the future. GitHub doesn't actually have anything similar to Azure Test Plans. It does have GitHub packages for artifact management. But, in the past, you might have thought, oh, wow, I need to move all of this. It'd be like moving to a new house. So, I got to move everything over, not just bits and pieces. And then I got to look at my third-party integrations. When you're moving to a new house, those third-party integrations are, is my doctor in the same neighborhood? Or my kid's going to go to the same school? With the third-party integrations, you're looking at deploying to Azure. If you're using other tools like JFrog Artifactory or something like that, you'd have to rewire up all of those third-party integrations. But this is not what we are asking you to do. So rather than moving to a new house, let's look at this like remodeling the kitchen. And what I mean by that is we're just going to go right to bringing GitHub and Azure DevOps together under the same roof. So if we remodel the first floor, remodel the kitchen, we're going to look at taking our Azure repos, migrating them to GitHub repos, but integrating with Azure boards and Azure pipelines and things. And the great thing about this is this enables us to take full advantage of all of those Copilot capabilities, like the Copilot coding agent and being able to do Copilot chat right on GitHub Enterprise Cloud. So right there in the main user interface, take full advantage of all of the GitHub advanced security capabilities, including agentic things or AI-based things like Copilot Autofix, leveraging security campaigns. So code scanning, secret scanning may have found lots of issues and vulnerabilities. Bring the security team in and create a security campaign to help you prioritize what needs to be addressed and fixed first, and leverage Copilot Autofix to fix those things for you. And when it comes to pipelines and GitHub Actions, there's actually ways you can use GitHub Actions that you're not able to use Azure pipelines. So there's going to be scenarios where you're going to use GitHub Actions and Azure pipelines side by side, and even look at GitHub Actions. Is that where you want to go long term? But by remodeling the kitchen versus moving the house, you can decide when and if you want to migrate things to GitHub Actions. All right, now, this is actually not new news. This blog post is from last November. Dan and I had the privilege of presenting at Microsoft Ignite, a very, very similar session. But Rajesh, who leads up the Azure DevOps team, now put out this blog post and said, now's the ideal moment to move your repositories to GitHub so your teams can fully harness Copilot's agentic power while still benefiting from your existing investments in Azure boards and Azure pipelines. But even then, this was not new news. We've been saying this for well over a year. And the analysts agree. The Forrester Wave for DevOps platforms that came out last June put Microsoft, being GitHub and Azure DevOps, in the leaders section in the far upper right corner. So there's a QR code for that. But as part of the follow-up message to this session, we will provide a PDF of this presentation. So you've got all these QR codes. You're going to see other links like that blog post embedded right here in the session. Now, we're working to make this as easy as possible for you. We've built out tooling to help migrate those repositories from Azure repos over to GitHub. And that GitHub Enterprise Importer will also then wire up the integration with Azure boards and Azure pipelines. And later on, I'll include a link how we've got a hands-on lab where you can try this out yourself and begin your planning for how you want to do this. But there's also Microsoft experts, GitHub experts, partners that are well trained in this. In fact, we've had, I don't know the exact number, but it's probably over a couple 100,000 repositories migrated already for enterprises like Vodafone, Accenture, Ernst & Young, Philips, and you can read some of their testimonials about combining Azure DevOps and GitHub together if you follow those links there. So what are we looking at? Even before migrating repositories, you can take advantage of Copilot Business or Copilot Standalone Enterprise, meaning you can leverage Copilot within Visual Studio Code, JetBrains, Eclipse, Xcode, and begin to get into agentic DevOps with things like agent mode right inside of the chat for those IDEs. You can leverage the core of GitHub Advanced Security with GitHub Advanced Security for Azure DevOps. So you'll have the code scanning, the secret scanning with push protection, dependency scanning, making sure that all of those libraries you're pulling in through NuGet, Maven, NPM, etc., are free of known vulnerabilities and helping you upgrade those dependencies when needed. But the key thing is when you migrate your repos over to GitHub, then you can take full advantage of all that GitHub Copilot and GitHub Advanced Security have to offer. And later on, I'll show exactly what we're talking about. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dan to talk about, Azure DevOps in this hybrid world.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of the kind of the things that we invested in over the last, really it's been a couple of years now, and then highlight some of the more recent investments that we've made during some demos here. So just for an overall view of kind of what Azure DevOps plus GitHub hybrid mode means, there's a couple of things, right? So the first one is around pipelines, right? If you move your repos over into GitHub, you can easily still run the existing pipelines that you have, right? So that's kind of like the big one. The other one is around traceability and work items. So being able to open up a work item, define it, and then link that to your GitHub branch, your GitHub commit, your GitHub pull requests. Being able to, when your pipeline runs a build on those particular on the particular repos that are connected to your work item, being able to see the build links on your work item. So all of that traceability that you've come to expect as like you would see if your code was in Azure Repos, all of that same stuff has come over if your code is now in GitHub Repos. And so we've made a bunch of investments around those two main spaces, but also did a bunch of stuff around scale improvements. So I think, when we first put this integration together, it's literally been like 6 or 7 years. We started out with allowing you to have 500 repos you could connect to a particular Azure DevOps project. We are now rolling out the ability to now have 2,000 repos connected. And so we've continued to kind of improve the scale as we see more and more customers come into the product, more and more customers doing hybrid mode, and then being able to scale for the bigger customers who have, those needs of have more and more repos. Another thing to point out is we now support GitHub Enterprise Cloud with data residency. So if you're using that inside of GitHub, you can, all the stuff that I'm talking about here around, integration between pipelines and work items, that all works if you're connected with GitHub Enterprise Cloud with data residency. And then we've also included, to make things a little bit easier on the licensing front, when you do a GitHub Enterprise license, it automatically comes with an Azure DevOps basic license. So that, historically people would have to buy 2 licenses and it was a major pain in the neck. Now, if you just have a GitHub Enterprise license, it automatically get an Azure DevOps license basic for no extra charge. And then the last 2 items are probably one of the more newer things that we've invested in and we're continuing to invest in. One of them is around our Azure DevOps MCP server. I'll kind of go through that in details here in a little bit. But that's been enabled over the last 6 months or so. We have a local MCP server that's been out there, and we're currently working on a remote one. And then the other one is GitHub Copilot for Azure boards. And that's the demo I'll go through here in a minute, which allows you to essentially open up work item, assign it to GitHub Copilot, and it goes off and does the work on your behalf, and kind of there's an experience there between that and your work items. All right, so next slide. So I think we kind of talked about this already, but one of the main points of the integration is being able to continue to use your pipelines when your code is moved over to GitHub. So when you move those repos over, you continue to do your CI/CD pipelines. You continue to see that full traceability between your pipelines and your work items and your code. And then the same thing we talked about again is with boards, where we've done a ton of investments. There's a bunch of videos out there that I'm not going to go through like all of the details and all the different types of integrations that we've done. But essentially, I can open up a work item and assign that to GitHub branch, a pull request, a commit. I can create a branch from a work item. I can also then do it from the reverse. If I'm in the pull request inside of GitHub, I can just link that back to a work item. And I'll show some of these details here in a minute. And then lastly, when we talk about the integration, again, one of the newer ones that we've done is the integration with GitHub Copilot. And so this allows me to open up a work item, define that work item, assign it over to Copilot, and that Copilot then goes off and does the work on my behalf. Obviously, your repos need to be inside of GitHub to go do that. And then, once it's all done and done its work, it'll come back and let you know. And so again, we'll walk through that here in a demo. And then lastly, just before we get into the demo stuff, just to talk a little bit about what's available in MCP Server. So the intent of an MCP server is to bring context into whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're using things like Visual Studio and Copilot, or you're using Cloud, whether you're creating your own agents, is being able to bring context from Azure DevOps into that environment or into that agent, and you can do things with it, right? So we allow you to bring in things like work items and wiki and test plans and repos and pipelines. So all the major pieces and parts that you see in Azure DevOps, you can bring over into context. And then what allows you to do is allows you to bring the power of Copilot and use AI to make decisions and look at things and even create work items and update items and that kind of stuff directly through Copilot. And so today we have a local MCP server only right now. We're working on a remote one. We'll have some announcements that'll come out of that on the blog posts and in our release notes and probably in the next 6 weeks. So right now, the MCP server, the local one, works really well with things like Visual Studio Copilot and Visual Studio Code. GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio Code. That's probably your best environment to use it. But it does work with other tools such as Visual Studio, Cloud Desktop, Cloud Code, Cursor, GitHub Copilot, CLI, that type of thing. So there's a bunch of information on in that second link there where the repo is, where you can see if you look on that, there's a bunch of instructions on how to get set up and how to use it, along with videos and the things that you can do. And I'll walk through a couple of videos here in a moment to go through those. All right, so let's start with a demo. So the first one we'll start with is around just the overall GitHub integration and how it works with Copilot. And so let me start off with just opening up a work item. So here I have a work item. It just has a very brief description, obviously. So here I want to, I already have this linked up to my repos over in GitHub. And what I want to be able to do is I want to basically assign this work item to Copilot and have it go off and do some work on my behalf. So in this case, I wanted to update a particular background color. I want to change some links. Pretty straightforward stuff. And so the idea is I can just come in here and create a new pull request with GitHub Copilot. When I do so, it's going to go ahead and authenticate, make sure that I have a GitHub Copilot license. So that's one of the requirements. And then it's going to pull the repositories that I have connected already to this project. So in this case, I have multiple, but it's going to remember based on the last one that I used, which is this demo.net one that I'm working on. And then I can select my branch as well. One of the new features that we have rolling out right now, it's about halfway rolled out, is allows me to select a custom coding agent as well if I wanted to use that. That's another selection item that you would see in the list that, like I said, that's rolling out as we speak. And then I can put in some special instructions as I see fit. So I'll go ahead and create this and kind of show you the experience of how that works. So it goes ahead and kicks off. You can see that Copilot has started its work. I should link down here in a minute. You should see it went ahead and created a branch for me, and it also created a pull request for me. And so if I open up the pull request, now these pull requests obviously will take several minutes, but I want to point out a couple of things. So here you can see the original prompt. And what we do is we send over the work item details, which is essentially the description, basically any large text file. So whether it's description, repo steps, if you have some sort of custom field that you're using in the work item itself, it'll bring that over. And then it brings over the last 50 comments as well. And so all of that stuff is used for context for the Copilot to go use and make the code changes. We'll automatically then link the work item back, so you can see the work item is linked. If I wanted to click on the link down here, it'll actually open up the work item itself as well. And then it'll go off and start doing its work. And so it'll kick off, the agent will kick off a session. And a lot of times these sessions will take, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, depending on what you're doing. I'm going to go back and just show one that I've already started, which is essentially a copy of the one that I just had. So here, I'm looking at the one that I had. I'm going to look at the pull request. You can see here that it went off and made some changes for me. It said, changed the background from a particular color to light blue, checked the links, did some minor changes here, etc. And from here, it's up to me then to enable it to be ready for, it's in draft mode originally, so I can then open it up and set it to non-draft mode. So it's ready for review. Then a human would go ahead and review this, and we would go ahead and do the merge. And so here I'm going to go ahead and confirm the merge. Now, if I come back to my work item, you will see that it'll automatically generate the commit, the merge commit, which obviously is important because it's the last one that's after the PR is done. So it's able to do this as well because I automatically already linked the AV pound. I already have the branch linked, so we're automatically doing a bunch of these links. I don't have to manually go do them for myself. If I wanted to, I could certainly come in here and add another, another link to a different branch, or I can do another commit. Essentially, just by clicking Add Link, Branch, I pick the repo, select the branch, or again, if I'm doing a commit, it would do pretty much the same thing. Repo, and then here's a list of the different commits that I could go choose from. So once we go ahead and do the merge commit, I'm going to come back in here and say, okay, all that's great. I want to go ahead and now delete the branch. By doing so again, I come back in here, it'll automatically remove that link. So you can see a lot of the stuff is just automatically happening for me. And then I also have a build in the background that ran and just succeeded and automatically linked that build to the work item as well. And then ultimately, we go ahead and complete it and close it. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to show. I thought there was one more thing I wanted to show on this one, but I already created the branch for the build for me. So that's essentially kind of the process, right? Is I open up a work item, I define that work item, takes all the stuff from that work item in, sends it over to the coding agent. Coding agent goes, does that work on my behalf, links everything up that I would think I wanted to link to, and then lets me know when it's kind of done, and then allows me to then manually review it, merge it, and be done with it type thing. You also notice a little icon over here where you can kind of keep track of when things are still working. So I can actually show it on my board to say which items are running the agent, which ones that are not running the agent, which ones are I'm waiting for, which ones are ready for me to go ahead and take a look at and review. So that's the first demo. The second one I wanted to walk through is MCP Server. So before I get into doing the MCP Server demos, get a little funny because sometimes they take a little while. And so I actually have a couple of videos that I walk through in speed mode. But I wanted to at least show you how these things work real quick. So here I have a new repo that we created called Azure DevOps Skills, which allows me to define a bunch of different skills. We're just kind of showing people how that might work. But what I do to get MCP Server working is essentially create an mcp.json in my VS Code folder. From here, I'm basically just adding the NPM package that it'll bring in. I'm defining, you can already see here that I actually have my organization name set up. I have some other things I can do on authentication. We also have this thing called domains where if I only want to see a certain amount of tools, I can restrict the amount of tools that show up in in the client. But you can see the setup is fairly straightforward, right? It's just saying, hey, I want to connect to the MCP server, and then define the organization that I want to go use, and then it'll start working against that organization. Now, I wanted to show a little bit about how these skills work, because these are a couple of examples I'm going to show. So skills are essentially just a set of instructions, resources. You can have JavaScript files in there as well. But here I'm just basically defining what it is that I want to do when I want to run that skill, and then what do I want the LLM to go do and process, and what tools do I want it to go use. So in this case, if I say I want to go get my work items, I provide some context on it, making sure that I have a project, because obviously I could have multiple projects and the work items are specific to a project. I can also then just say, these are the tools that I care about to be using. I want, when I go ahead and pull the work items back, these are the fields that I care about. And then when I display the work items, here's how I want them displayed, etc. So pretty straightforward. And so I have a couple of different skills. I have a skills for my work. I have a skills for summarizing. I have one for creating work iterations. So iterations on my project. So that's the first one I'm going to go skip through. So for those of you who have used Azure DevOps before, every time I start a new year, I got to go create a bunch of iterations for my project. Depending on how long your iterations are, that could take you 5 minutes. It could take you an hour, depending on how many you have and what you're doing. And so now I can use my MCP server to go do that for me. So here I'm going to kind of go walk through that. So here I'm going to go ahead and say create work items for my particular project. I want you to create these new iterations through 2026, and then I want you to add them to a particular team. In this case, I'm just doing one team. So it's going to go ahead and kick off. It knows that I'm using that skill because that's what the / command was. It's going out there and now giving me a list of my iterations, creating a set of tasks for me for the LLM to follow, which is create iterations, list them first, create them, and then assign them. So you can see here that the last one was iteration 51. You can see that it knows by looking at the existing ones that we're doing 2 weeks iterations. And then the next thing it's going to go do is going to go build me a list of them to create new ones. So here it says, hey, I got 2 week iterations, Monday through Friday. Let's start at 51. Let's go ahead and create the next. So if I take a look at the output, or I'm sorry, the request that it's going to go make, you can see it basically built a bunch of iterations for me with the iteration name. It's following the same pattern that I did before, iteration 1, iteration 2, et cetera, et cetera. The start date and finish dates through the end of the year. And then we'll go ahead and run. It'll go ahead and then create those iterations. And then after those iterations are created, it'll take a look at the response, grab those iteration IDs, and then assign them to the Contoso team. Because in Azure DevOps, you got to create the work item or the iterations first, and then you have to assign them to the different teams. So here we'll go ahead and identify which ones it needs. For some reason, this takes a couple seconds, so I guess we got 20 seconds left. Here you go. It'll go ahead and assign those iterations out and save them to my project and that team. So this is a nice, easy, simple way for you to quickly generate a bunch of iterations for your project without having to go in and do a bunch of manual work or create some script to do it. That's one example. Another example here, which I think is kind of a fun one, just to set the stage on this one here, is I'm going to take a document, in this case, a Markdown document that I have. I wanted to go ahead and read that document. I wanted then to go create an epic for me, and then I wanted to break down that epic into a bunch of features for me. And so that's essentially the idea. So here I have another / command where actually I don't think I'm using the / command. I thought I was, but I'm not. So this one here is where I've taken the Markdown file, create an epic into my particular project, and then break it down into smaller child features, and then also add it to my team. So it's going to go ahead and create the epic by looking at the Markdown file. Here you can so it creates it. You see all the info. Now here you'll find that it actually throws an error because I made a mistake in how I defined it. I'm not defining the project necessarily first and what the right iteration or area path is. So the LLM is trying to reason that, and what it does is it's going out and getting the projects for me. It's going to get the teams for me, making sure that it finds the right area path for me, and then adjusts the request to create a new work item accordingly. So here went ahead and created a new epic. Here it went ahead then and created, it's now going to create the child work items for that. And it's going to go create 6 of those. So I'm just going to try to fast forward a few seconds. So it creates all 6. I think that's all 6, and then it links them up for me. So it goes ahead and creates the epic, creates a bunch of features, and then completes them all, gives me a summary of them, and then shows me the results of the items that I just created. So I'm going to go ahead and show that real quick. So if I come back to my board, you can see that this is the work item that I created. You can see it has a nice scope. It has nice success criteria. You can see all the different work items that the child work items that it created for me, and link those up. And again, it's all pretty much all the kind of the same information you would expect filling out in the description. Now, of course, you could ask it to go ahead and set priorities. You could ask it to set efforts and some of these other fields if you wanted to, and you can go ahead and do that. And the last thing I'll show is another / command to summarize that work item. So if I want to go ahead and summarize that work item, which I essentially would just do, hey, boards, get me this particular work item and show it. And so it'll go out and fetch the work item itself. It'll go out and fetch the comments. It'll go out and fetch all the links related to that work item, and then give me a nice summary of here's the epic that you asked me to get. These are the links that are there. I can go take a look at. Here's a summary of it, and then here's some comments for it. So that's just again another example of the different things you can do with our MCP server. And like I said, this is a local MCP server to start. We are working on a remote one. Once the remote one comes, you can do a lot more interesting things like add this into create a Foundry agent. If you have your own custom agents, et cetera, we'll be able to do a lot more with it. So I think that's it, Dave. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Dan. All right, so let's talk about what you get from GitHub Copilot on GitHub itself. So I'll go in and do some demos here and show things like custom agents and agentic code review and the agents tab, and with agentic code review, asking Copilot to make changes in any pull request. So being able to steer Copilot as we go through things. Show how code scanning is automatically done for any work that the coding agent does, and that's actually regardless of whether or not you have a GitHub Advanced Security license. The Copilot metrics dashboard in the control plane. So from an enterprise perspective, you can control who has access to Copilot, what models are being made available, and things like that. So let me just get this guy kicked off over here, and then, all right, perfect. So now I'm going to switch over to my demo environment. So yeah, I'm using Azure boards here. I've got plenty of, dashboards configured just the way I like them, so that we can see our burn down charts and our active work items, and we can drill through the hierarchy of epics, features, and user stories, and all of that. Now, if I go over to my boards, we can see we've got a few things in progress here. And one of the things I want to look at is this create multi-select breed filter. Actually, first, let me go and show you what we're working on here. This is a site for adopting out dogs and that. So, you can see all of the available dogs. We've got golden retrievers, French bulldogs, German shepherds, poodles, etc. But right now, there's no way to filter based on the different breeds and such. So that's what we're looking at here on this particular user story, is we want to create a multi-select breed filter dropdown. Now, one thing to note, in the background here, I kicked off another item, and you can see Copilot Coding Agent is currently working on adding search engine optimization to our website here. But if I drill in to create multi-select breed filter dropdown, now one thing, context is king when it comes to Copilot and the Copilot Coding Agent. So you want to be very explicit in defining your user stories and your bugs and and things like that. There's also ways you can add custom instructions to your repositories in Markdown files that can provide a lot of things that say, hey, we always use Playwright for testing. Hey, this is our preferred tech stack. Here's certain patterns that we follow. Those things you can codify in custom instructions and such. But here we can see that we went in here, just like Dan did, created the ask Copilot coding agent to work on this. It said at 4:49, hey, okay, I'll create a draft pull request and work on this. About 9 minutes later, it came in and said the pull request is ready for review. Now, so far I'm showing what Dan showed, but I'm going to dig just a little deeper here on things. Let me make one adjustment to my windows here just to keep an eye on things. So, as I scroll down here, yeah, Copilot provides a really nice description of what it did. You can see it added new tests and everything. It automatically leverages the MCP server for Playwright. Now, what that enables it to do is it can actually then provide screenshots that show exactly what it's adding. So there's the available breeds new dropdown. There it is when it's actually dropped down, and we can see all of the different breeds and such. And if we scroll on down, yep, there's our link to back to our user story. But we can go in and look at the session details here for exactly what Copilot has done through all of this. And if I scroll through here, one of the things, and this gets very detailed. It goes through all of its analysis phases and everything. Hey, let me explore, find the right code. Now I have a good understanding of the code base. I'm going to start making changes and such. But one of the advantages I want to point out here, if I go on down, is we can see that, and of course I'm going to have trouble finding it now. So I'm going to do this. There it is, CodeQL. Now let me run CodeQL. Whoops, no, that's not exactly where I want to be. There we go. It's going to run CodeQL security scans on the changed files. Now, thankfully, in this case, it didn't find any new security vulnerabilities. But what I want to point out is, even if you don't have GitHub Advanced Security licenses, we will run CodeQL and code quality checks on the code that is generated by the Copilot coding agent. Now, when you go in and make changes, that's when you would need to have the GitHub Advanced Security license. All right, so if I go back to the PR now, and look for comments, so we can see for reviewers, Copilot was actually one of the reviewers. We have things set up to where we can automatically request that Copilot is going to do code reviews. And we can see that it left a couple of comments. And I'm going to jump right to one of these comments. There we go. So it's looking at this code that was added, talking about the list box, and it says, hey, this is something that can break screen reader semantics and keyboard interaction for list boxes. Now, unless you really have, accessibility and screen readers top of mind when you're doing code review, that might be something that could be difficult to pinpoint and request. But Copilot noted that, and it even has suggestions for how we could fix that. Now, if I continue to scroll down, you'll see that as part of our checks, sure, code scanning is running on GitHub Actions and the code quality checks are being done there, but I'm still leveraging Azure Pipelines for CI/CD in this case. So we're trying to make this integration as seamless as possible. So I can see a summary right here in GitHub. But like if I click on the tests, then I'm going to go to that nice detailed graphical test review where I could drill in and see all of the tests and everything. And I've got the nice, graphical representation of test results. And this is consistent for all of my pipelines. This is something that's not yet available in GitHub Actions. So, maybe one reason you want to continue with Azure pipelines. When I go to the summary, I can see there's the commit, there's the pull request. So I can go back to the pull request, and so it's seamless integration going back and forth. All right, now I'm going to go to a different. I want to go to a different user story here. And that is this implement a multi-stage deployment using Azure pipelines. So yes, you can use GitHub Copilot to help you author Azure pipelines YAML templates as well. So yep, you can see the coding agent did the work and everything here for us. Now, if I drill into this PR, and I'm going to go right to the session details, because the key thing I want to point out here, let me get my little search string. There we go. Here in the agents session, it's saying, hey, I used the Azure Pipelines subagent. So everything from this point until you get to end agent or failed is actually being done by the Azure Pipelines subagent. Now, it picked up on that automatically. But another thing that you can do, so if I go up to the top here, move that guy out of the way, you can see we've added some agent controls right at the top of the screen. So I can go in, we can see our sessions here, but I could go in and add a new task or whatever. And I can pick the Azure Pipelines custom agent, or I've got a GitHub Actions agent or a search engine optimization agent. One of the really new things is what we call Agent HQ. We're bringing in third-party agents. So in addition to Copilot, you can work with Claude Code or OpenAI Codex as your agent if you so choose. From the models, you can pick different models. Notice that we have Auto. Right now, Auto is going to pick the model based on what's currently available, not being overused or whatever. In the future, we're making Auto intelligent so that it's going to look at the context of your task and pick the model based on what is going to best fit the task and everything. Now, if I go up here to the Agents tab, which is new in GitHub Repos, I can see, okay, here's all of my sessions, but I can look at all of the sessions across this repo. And we can see these were mostly all by me, DevOps 30, but there's also the session here from Dan. We used this same repo for a demo for Ignite back in November. So you can see all of the agent sessions across all the contributors on the repo, not just your own. So now, if I go back to that particular pull request, there we go. And now I want to look at my reviewed changes. There we go. So you can see I did some code reviews here, but Copilot also did a code review as well. And so here Copilot is commenting on its, summary of the code review and everything, but here's where it's coming in and making suggestions and such. Saying, hey, maybe we want to refine the resource group name since we're deploying to dev, QA, and then prod environments and such. Talking about adding better error handling. If you're not a super senior Azure Pipelines developer, you may not know the best practices yet for error handling and such. So let's see. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I'm really using GitHub as my peer programmer and that. So now let's talk about that custom agent, right? Where do we define these custom agents? Now you've got a couple of choices. I'm going to switch over to my other window here because here is, whoops. Let's see. If I refresh, is that going to, there we go. This is the organization where the Pets Workshop lives. But if I go into this special repo, the .github private repo, you'll see we have this agents folder. And within the agents folder, I've got Azure Pipelines MD. That's my Azure Pipelines agent. So, we go through general guidelines, how we want our things structured, best practices, testing, security, on and on and on, even, talking about whether or not to create templates and things. Now, I've had a lot of experience working with Azure Pipelines, but I did not create this from scratch. If you go out to the awesome Copilot repo, which actually, yeah, I'll just open it from here. Thought maybe I had it open, but so if you go to the awesome Copilot repo, this thing is growing day by day. You can find examples of agents, prompts, instructions, now awesome skills, awesome agentic workflows, and things. And specifically, I pulled the information for this Azure Pipelines custom agent directly from awesome Copilot. So I just took this text and copied it into that Markdown file within my agents folder in my organization. Whoops, in my organization. So let's go back. There we go. Now, where I set this up is if I go back here to oh, come on, let me get out of full screen mode. There we go. If I go back up to, and I'm in the wrong repo, but I will quickly get back to DevRel Labs and go to my enterprise level. So at the enterprise level, we've added AI controls. And in here is where I define, do I want the code review agent? Do I want the coding agent? Do I want to allow Anthropic, Claude, and OpenAI Codex? Custom agents. Where are my custom agents defined? And this is where I say which organization within the enterprise has the definitions for all of these custom agents. It even gives me the way to jump into my audit logs specifically for everything that Copilot has done. So you've got complete traceability on everything that the Copilot coding agent will do. When I go over to the Copilot section here, I can look at things like what models are allowed. The list of models continues to grow week over week. And, so you can come in here and say, so I've got one here that this is a relatively new one. Yeah, Anthropic Claude Opus 4.6. This came out recently enough that a policy has not been set. It'll always stay at select a policy until you come in as the administrator and say, hey, do we want to let each organization decide? Do we want to have this enabled everywhere, disabled everywhere, so that you've got plenty of control? The other thing to point out here is that MCP servers, you can set up your own MCP registry and then say, do you want to restrict MCP servers to just those that show up in your MCP registry? Or do you want to allow all, meaning that your own MCP registry is really just a list of suggestions and things? So again, you've got, a lot of control over what you want to allow within your enterprise and within your organizations. Now, when it comes to usage, we've had at the enterprise level these Copilot dashboards. Now we have these dashboards available at the organization level, and you can see which models are getting the most usage. What's our daily usage? Other things like, code completion. How many completions are being accepted? What's the acceptance rate? Here we go. Here we can see there was a shift in like Claude Opus 4.5 to Claude Opus 4.6 and everything. So lots of information available at your fingertips. And while these dashboards themselves are not configurable, the AI APIs are available, so you can take this data and even more data and build out your own Power BI dashboards and things like that. All right, so one other thing I want to show, keep an eye on time here, but I'm going to come back over here. I've got a tab open here. Is this the one? Well, actually, I will go right to the pull request that I am interested in. There's our new pull request. So that's the one that was just created while we were working here. But the one I want to go to, number 9. So a while ago, we added some Python utilities in here, but they had some security issues. So here, this is with CodeQL, looking at the code in your pull requests, you're going to get these warnings and errors right in your pull request. But look, Copilot Autofix is suggesting a fix for this. And this is just a one-line fix, but if we scroll down here, we've got another one, use of broken or weak cryptographic algorithm. It's actually a more complex fix, right? So it can help you even with those non-trivial security fixes and such. And I could go ahead and commit that suggestion right here as part of this pull request, or I could open up a new pull request for that and everything. So now if I go to the security tab, couple other things I want to point out real quickly here is if I go into my Copilot or my code scanning alerts, I want to point out something here. I know it was mentioned that, we don't scan COBOL. We'd have to still use Sonar for that. Well, guess what? You can add other tools in here. So I can go in here, and available to me are Sonar Cloud and Sonar Cube. So the point is, you can add other security tools. So if there's things that GitHub Advanced Security doesn't cover that you need covered by other tools, like there's 79 different tools that can get plugged in here. And if I go and look back at the my security tab again, something else I want to point out is I've got a security campaign here. So this is where I'm going to go up to the organization level, because at the organization level, there's a few more options here. But this is where the security team and the developers would come together. The security team can go in and set up, different filters and different campaigns for addressing security issues here. And if I go in and look at this particular issue, I can assign this. I can even assign this to Copilot to fix. So again, Copilot can help us with these fixes and everything. I've got another campaign out here where we were working with, whoops, go back to the organization level, sorry. Here we go. I've got one that demonstrates JFrog integration. What I want to point out here is, yes, a number of these were detected by CodeQL, but a number of these were detected by the JFrog binary secret scanner. So if you're working with containers, at some point you want to scan the base images of those containers that you're working with to make sure that they don't contain hard-coded secrets or any vulnerabilities or things like that. So you're taking advantage of GitHub Advanced Security capabilities that are only available on GitHub itself to bring all of these tools together and give you a single pane of glass. All right, we're running short on time here, so I think with that, I'm going to go back over to my slides and a couple of things here. You can start today, even before migrating repos over. Use GitHub Copilot when the code is in Azure Repos inside of Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, etc. Plan your migration. Use that GitHub Enterprise importer, and the next slide is going to have some great links for that. Migrate code to GitHub and connect with Azure boards and Azure pipelines. So we now have new GitHub skills out there, and one in particular is a lab to walk through how to migrate repos from Azure DevOps over to GitHub. So you can get hands-on experience with this. Now, like we've said, we're going to provide we're going to provide a PDF so you have all of these resources available to you. Key thing to note, if you're not aware, we've worked on the licensing so that when you buy GitHub Enterprise, we now include the Azure DevOps basic license with it. If you've been getting your licenses through Visual Studio subscriptions, that's included GitHub Enterprise for a while now. Full documentation on all your options for integrating. And I want to point out, check out the Azure DevOps roadmap. Azure DevOps is going to continue to live on. And Dan and his team have been adding new items to the roadmap. I mentioned there's been kind of a reinvigoration of roadmap items for things like Azure test plans. Dan's and his team have been working to scale the integration better with GitHub and all of that. And then one last plug here. I put out a GitHub monthly enterprise roundup. I look across the GitHub blogs, the change logs, white papers, YouTube videos, pull it all together from an enterprise perspective so that you can see what's new across all of those resources from an enterprise perspective. All right, now I know we've got a couple minutes left. There were a couple of questions here. I saw, looks like Azure DevOps is going away. Nope, that is not the case. I don't know, Dan, do you want to comment on what we see as the future for Azure DevOps?
Yeah, I responded to that one. But yeah, so Repos isn't going away. Azure DevOps isn't going away. I think what you're just seeing is you're seeing a little bit different of an investment. You're seeing a lot of investment when it comes to GitHub Repos and AI and agentic AI and that kind of stuff. For Azure Repos, it's a little less of that. And then we are going to be making some investments there for AI, but it's mostly going to be integrating with Copilot. So there'll be some more interesting things that we'll be able to kind of talk about in the future. But for right now, that's kind of the general theme.
Awesome. And then, yep, I saw the comment about COBOL and had to move to Sonar. Hopefully you see how you can plug tools, other security tools right in to get a single pane of glass with GitHub. Will there be a GitHub Copilot for Azure Pipelines? You saw how you can create a custom agent, and there's already examples out there at the awesome Copilot repository. Yeah, if you just do a search for GitHub Awesome Copilot, you'll easily find that repo. And were there any other questions that came in while I was presenting?
No, I think I grabbed them all for you, Dave.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I will, let's see. Oh, I am not connected in here. So, yes, we'll have all the resources available when we provide a PDF of this presentation. So yeah, you'll be able to see all the QR codes, all the links, and everything. With that, Dan, any closing comments?
No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And I know Anna noted in here, look at aka.ms, Azure DevOps Live for additional sessions coming up in the future. And have a great day, everybody.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.